All right, so as I said, this is the second iteration of the training. This was motivated by the fact that both Jim and I lost our certification for race officers from U.S. Sailing and had to take the course again. And we thought, well, okay, it's all fresh in our minds. Why don't we generate something that the people at SSA could benefit from? So this is mimics a lot of what goes on in the basic race management seminar presented by U.S. Sailing, but there's also a lot that is very specific to SSA. The second part of the training is tomorrow night at 7. Jim is going to be running that one. And there are quizzes after each part, which we would like you to do, not so that we can determine whether you're going to be a good race officer or not, but basically to stimulate your thinking and get some ideas planted of issues that you may run across on the race course. So first of all, let's talk a moment about what a sailor expects of the RC. And so this is probably what you expect of the RC. And if you're on the RC, this is what people expect of you. Perfection. And I define that as, having good starting lines, good courses, and nothing that is going to result in a redress hearing against the race committee. Knowledge is important, of course. Fair competition, accurate scoring, races that are conducted as directed, safety, obviously, decisiveness, communication with the sailors, and last but certainly needs to be near the top, fun for both the sailors and the race committee, because we want race committee to leave the boats on Sunday afternoon feeling good and willing to come back and race again. So if you're going to be a good PRO or DRO, you need to have the knowledge, and you can get that through this presentation and tomorrow night's, through study, through experience. But you also need judgment, and that, of course, is a nebulous quality that comes into play. And we have to unfortunately leave that up to you to develop that judgment. But it's something that really is necessary to be a top-notch PRO or DRO. Of course, SSA is known for excellent one design racing, and we need really high-level race committee work. And that translates into needing highly trained pros and DROs for all the regattas. If you have not taken the U.S. Sailing Basic Race Management course, I strongly encourage you to do that. It is very detailed, very valuable, and it only takes a day. And it's basically CBYRA reimburses you for the cost of the course, so it is free. So tonight we're going to basically start from before the regatta, several weeks before the regatta, and end right at the start of the race. And tomorrow night, Jim will talk from the start all the way through to when you're ready to leave the club after the regatta is over. Your principal resource for all things racing is U.S. Sailing. And if you're not a member, I strongly encourage you to be one. As I said, attend the Basic Race Management Seminar, get your certification to be a club race officer. And there is a digital log called SOARS, where you maintain your activities, which maintains your certification. It's not cheap, but when you think about the price of a regatta, it's cheaper than a regatta for 1 year, and you get a discount for 3 years. If you don't have the racing rules of sailing, you need to get it if you're going to be a PRO or DRO. You can get it for $29.95 from Amazon or a bookseller, or if you're a member of US Sailing, you can get it for $7 with a digital coupon that's on their website. Likewise, you can download a free digital version if you're a member of US Sailing. It's important to put tabs in on pages that you're going to need for reference rapidly when you're on the race course. So, and of course, you need to bring this with you when you're on race committee, because this is the fundamental document. Another good pamphlet is Join the Race Committee Team. It's only $7 from US Sailing, and it really describes all the positions on a race committee and what they do and their responsibilities. There's a new one out. I just got it, and it's well worth buying. Even though it says entry-level training manual, as a PRO, you're not going to have, always experienced race committee members. So if you have this on board, or if you have looked at it, you know what to tell your team in terms of instructions for them. Now, in the racing rules of sailing, there are a lot of chapters and a lot of appendices. The important ones for race committee are these. First of all, anything that is italicized is a definition, and the definition is in the front of the book. Part 1 is the fundamental rules. Probably the most important for race committees is part 3. It's only 5 pages long, and how to conduct a race. The signals, the flags and other signals are inside the back cover. Part 4 is other requirements. Part 7 is race organization, and we'll be talking about some of these tonight. Appendix A is scoring. Appendix J is basically how to do a notice of race and sailing instructions. And Appendix U is the audible signal racing system, the 3-minute system that we use often with the iStarts. All right, so you are going to be a PRO for a regatta. What are your responsibilities? Principally, in the beginning, the responsibility is to work with your DRO and your service day coordinator to get people to serve on race committee. You need sufficient staff and you need appropriate skill levels. For next weekend, I'm the PRO and Gary Jones is the DRO. And so one of our issues up until last night was having people that could drive boats, but we've managed to fill that slot, fortunately. The service day coordinator, who is Bob Rutch, who's on the call this evening, beats the bushes, helps coordinate the staff, but it's our responsibilities to set the quality, tell him how many we need and what skill requirements. And we also have a responsibility for recruiting the key members of our race committee. And to do this as early as possible in sailing season. In other words, if you know you're going to do a great big regatta in October, why not grab the people you need early on and get them to sign up for your regatta instead of, a multi-class club regatta in the middle of the summer. So be proactive, recruit staff. I'm going to show you some checklists for the schedule for establishing staffing requirements, and be in contact with the service day coordinator. Work with him. The Service Day Coordinator at 4 weeks should start promoting the event, discussing unfulfilled needs, and weather predictions, fleet type, minimum staffing position. Obviously, if it's a light air and small fleets, you can lower the staffing level. If it's huge fleets and foul weather predicted, you need more people. And hopefully by 2 weeks, you've got it settled, but usually that's not the case. And so you'll have last minute staffing needs. We have developed, Barbara Vosbury, myself, and Jim have developed checklists largely because most of us who go out on the race committee do it maybe 2 or 3 times a year, and trying to remember all the items that we need to take care of is a challenge, especially as you get to be my age. The other reason is, and a little anecdote, in the early days of aviation, there were a lot of plane crashes. It was pretty dangerous. Commercial aviation, military aviation, you name it, they were falling out of the sky. The one thing that improved safety and made the aviation sort of a routine mode of transportation was that they required checklists. And so you'll see in the cockpit, the pilot and co-pilot going through a checklist before they take off, just to make sure everything is the way it should be. So these checklists are on the SSA website. They are in the club.severnsailing.org website, the one that you need to be a member to sign into. They're under communication, and under there's a race committee thing under communication, under documents, and then race committee, and you'll see it under there. So my advice is to pull that down, download it, print it out, and use it. Here's a list of the main items. I won't go over that with you. They're all in the checklist. It's pretty detailed, as you can see. Here's part of the one for the PROs. And similarly for the DRO. One thing an idea we had that is in number 4 is the issue of who is responsible for the equipment on a boat. And it always gets to be people finger pointing, or there's no finger pointing and no one is responsible for it. So when we have the race committee muster meeting at the beginning of the day, we're suggesting that you assign one bosun per boat, and that person will just make sure that the boat gets what it needs in the way of equipment and marks. And at the end of the day or the end of the regatta, that equipment gets cleaned and put away. Another important point in number 6, and you as PROs and DROs need to make your staff aware of this, is the QR codes. Each boat has a QR code at the helm. And if you take your phone and use the camera on the phone to get the information from that QR code, there's a detailed description of the boat, how to run it, how to deal with the man overboard cords that we require on the outboards. Some of them are basically Bluetooth instead of being a plug-in kind of thing. So if people are having trouble with the boat, have them look at those QR codes. These QR codes are also available on the club.severnsailing.org website, down under the bottom one, race committee documents. And so you can get your drivers to use their phones, either download and print out the QR code document, or just shoot off the screen, and they can review the information ahead of time. I had a situation last year where 3 guys got in the Edgar D, and we were all set to go. We pulled the favored end, and Huey pulled out. Edgar D couldn't get started, and they were fooled around and fooled around and fooled around, never looked at the QR code. It turned out they needed to pull the choke. So this is a good thing to get your boat drivers to look at before the regatta. And here's the checklist, once again, very detailed. Here's how you access the QR codes. Once you sign in, there's communication in the upper right-hand corner. Under that, there's a document library, and down at the bottom of the Race Committee Guidelines section, Race Committee Guidelines has the checklists and also one sheet of all the QR codes. So let's talk a little bit about the NOR and the SIs. As a PRO, you hopefully will deal with the SSA, NOR, and SIs because a lot of effort has gone into those. And you have a couple of situations, either where you have no amendments to them and you just use them as is for a club regatta, or you have a few amendments. You possibly, it's heavily amended, perhaps for invitational regatta, or there is a event-specific NOR and SIs, such as major invitationals, championships, etc. We strongly encourage you as the PRO to get the regatta chair to use the SSA NORs with an SI, which is one document. It's on the website. It's the paper one that's printed out and in the clubhouse. It's a combination NOR and SI. And then if there are issues or changes you want to make, you can make amendments. And you need to be aware that there are specific rules in the Racing Rules of Sailing of how to make those amendments. And there's correct language. And the language is that you need to refer specifically to the rule and state the change. And I show an example down there that in the SSA, NOR, and SIs, Rule 7.1 in there says the warning signal on Sunday will be at 1100 hours. Well, some regattas you want to start at 10. So this is the language you have to use. State the rule and the change. If you are dealing with event-specific NORs and SIs, Appendix J in the Racing Rules of Sailing is the template, and you have to include all sections. Important to get your regatta chair, to get the approval of the Standing Race Committee chair of any event-specific NORs and SIs. And there can be supplemental information, housing, and all that kind of stuff, but it has to be stated that it is not part of the NOR or SI. Appendix J, which is the NOR and SI, these are a few things taken from it, that in both the sailing instructions and the NOR, section 1.1 or 2.1, are the items that shall be included in those sections of the NOR or SIs. Then there's a list of things that are included if they apply. And in the NOR, there can be information to help people decide whether to come. In other words, what's the sailing area, what courses, how many races, so forth and so on. Housing is not part of that, but it can be a supplemental part to the NOR and SIs. If you have to start from scratch, and I really don't recommend it, Appendix S, and if you read the first sentence in the second paragraph, or it says these sailing standard sailing instructions may be used at an event in place of printed sailing instructions made available to each boat. They're sort of standard. Once again, you have to do some editing and make it specific to your race, but it's not an appendix that you will normally run across and use. So the other parts of the racing rule of sailing that we need to know about are 85 in part 7, how to change the rules, how to change the racing rules, how to change the class rules, what are the national prescriptions, who's the organizing authority, who appoints the race officials, and the fact that the NOR must conform to Rule J1. The race committee in paragraph 90, sailing instruction scoring, the SIs must conform to Rule J2 and scoring per Appendix A. So you got all the paperwork done and loaded up, either printed and ready to go or up on the regatta website. It's the day of the racing, and you need to arrive at least an hour before the competitors' meeting. The first thing to do is launch any boats that need to be launched. That's typically the rib, but start all the engines on all the boats. Make sure they start, make sure there's gas. And in the office, get a printout of the check-in sheets and deal with any last-minute registrations if you have to. Then you have a muster meeting where in the classroom, typically you assemble the whole race committee, brief them, confirm your boat assignments. The DRO deals with the bosuns to direct loading the gear, sailing gear, the ancillary gear like the orange boxes, the briefcases, the radios, eye starts if you're dealing with a boat that does not have a fixed eye start, and thermal blankets if it's that kind of weather. Certainly the AED should go out on all races and regattas. And of course, the responsibility of the DRO and the bosuns is to make sure everything is there. If you're using favored end as a signal boat, you need to load the class flags on the poles in the harbor. It's much safer there than rocking around out on the bay and having someone who may have to either stand on the side and reach way across or get up on the roof. So you rig those and hoist them, make sure they hoist properly. X from left to right, X of course is individual recall, P is the preparatory. The next one is whatever penalty flags you think might need. 2 class flags, AP for postponement, I for round the ends rule, and the first substitute for general recall. So the muster meeting, here's some thoughts on what you might tell the folks there. Thank them for coming. Go around, have everyone introduce themselves. Emphasize that the quality of the racing that is going to happen that weekend depends on them. Give the boat assignments. Once again, appoint the bosuns and tell them about the QR codes. One thing that I am particularly positive about is not to have any verbal communication with competitors except in an emergency, because as soon as you tell one competitor something, you're giving him an unfair advantage, giving that boat an unfair advantage. And you want the sailing to be as fair as possible. Encourage questions, show how to flake the tackle, talk about the radios, and if they're using a handheld, always face into the wind so the wind doesn't go across the front of the radio and make just a noise, a wind sound, and drown out your voice. Exchange cell phone numbers. So as a PRO, it's a good idea if the wind is dicey, either too little or too much, to send a boat out to the race course early. Talk to the fleet captains or class representatives and find who on the water you should contact if there are questions. You conduct a competitors meeting, post the notices, and of course, load up and leave the dock 1 hour before the race or earlier. In the competitors meeting, welcome everyone, and then introduce yourself and the DRO. Talk about the location of the course, whether you're going to be in A or C. And here's a little factoid that perhaps you didn't know about that I discovered when I was looking over the SSA SIs, that the only way you can go to C is if you so state in an amendment on the on the notice board. So you can't just go sailing out and looking whether you want to go to A or C without having told the competitors that that's a possibility. What's your starting sequence going to be, and what's the schedule for the day or for the weekend? Three races one day, 2 the second, etc. Try not to give much verbal information. And if a question is in the SIs, you can always say, as shown in the sailing instructions. So keep referring back to that. Verify who your on-water class representative is. Now, in terms of protests, there has to be a person and a location that's available for the whole protest time, the 1 hour after the dock time. So you need to identify one member of the race committee who will stay in one place, or if necessary, to swap people, but have the same location. So anyone who wants to submit a protest or a redress can go to that place and submit them. And of course, finally, deal with the car keys so you don't get blocked in. Nobody gets blocked in. All right, time to go out. On the way out, stop occasionally, check the wind direction, look at sailboats and flags, and figure out which way it's coming from. Proceed to the general starting area. Criteria for a starting area are shown here. Probably the first and most important is that it's long enough, there's length for the weather leg there. And there are a lot of things to avoid: crab pots, shallow water, high traffic areas, Interstate 95 coming out of the harbor and up to Baltimore, if you can avoid that, areas near government marks, and especially other clubs' race areas. And this is a place where the PRO needs to be aware and perhaps coordinate with other clubs if they are having big races out there at the same time. Once you get on station, use plenty of road and your anchor. If you're using favored end, it's a pretty heavy anchor. There's chain, and it almost always will bite in pretty well unless you're in one of the oyster shell areas. The windward mark takes off the boat and takes off to the general position, and you, as the PRO or DRO, assign members to be a recorder, a wind reader, deal with the flags, signal timer, iStart operator, and line callers. And of course, people can double up on these. The person who's reading the wind during a start can take another responsibility. Check in, hoist code flag L with one sound, come with an inhale. Record the check-ins on a check-in sheet, loudly acknowledge each boat, and don't check them in unless they satisfy SSA SI 12.1. And there's a scoring penalty for that if they don't. You've got somebody who's responsible for wind readings, and that's very important. On favored end, it's best to put the person on the bow with the wind stick and compass and take a wind reading every whatever you want, 2, 3, 5 minutes, and record them on the wind log. All these documents are in that valise, that little briefcase, the black briefcase. So it's worth having a look through that and seeing what's in there, because you'll be surprised that some very important things are there. Don't hold the radio next to your ear while you're trying to take a wind reading with a compass, because any steel, metal will obviously distort the reading. And so it's best to keep all the obstructions and metal away. Okay, so you want to set the course, the windward mark, take the average of the wind readings and go with it. Get your distance either from the AIS screen, GPS screen, the apparent size of the weather mark boat at wherever they are. You can send them out farther, you can bring them back. And I especially use the time for the first leg of the first race as an indicator. Use the radio. The offset mark, which is for the A course, does not need to be perpendicular to the wind. It can be slightly downwind of perpendicular. You don't want them necessarily putting up spinnakers on that, but it can be a reach. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. If you are fooling around trying to get it perfect, sailors are getting frustrated with the postponement, and they'd much rather be racing. A rule of thumb is anytime you have 2 marks that have to be passed, you need 7 to 10 boat lengths. And the reason for that is each mark will have a 3 boat length circle around it, and you don't want those 2 circles to overlap. So at a minimum of 7, probably 10 is, a little generous. Setting the leeward mark in the gate, 75 to 150 feet above the starting line. You need to fly G if you're got a gate, and once again, 7 to 10 boat lengths between the marks. So the mark boat throws the first gate mark in the water, and then there's usually circles around, takes a compass reading, tries to figure out what perpendicular to the wind is, and usually ends up with a gate that's kind of cocked. So Jim learned of this technique talking to some sailors, I think from AYC, and that is the mark boat puts the first mark in the water, circles back around 7 to 10 boat lengths, and of course below the mark, and proceeds slowly upwind, streaming the second mark. You figured out what the compass bearing to the mark should be, to the mark that's in the water, in order to give you a perpendicular gate to the wind. And that, of course, is you either add or subtract 90 degrees from the wind direction. So when the signal boat is at the right place, it drops a small floatable object, whatever that might be, into the water and continues upwind. And when the mark is even with the object, or a little bit before it gets even with the object, drop the anchor. So then the second mark will pull into where that floatable object is and be all set to go, and the line will be pretty square. And of course, don't leave the junk in the water. And here it is shown schematically. If you follow on the left-hand side, M1 is the first position of the mark being streamed when the boat is in position 1. At position 2, the mark is still, well below the line. The boat is exactly where you want, and it drops the paper into the position. In 3, the mark has gotten about half the length of the road to the paper ball, and you drop it there, so the mark will be pulled in to position 4. When you set a leeward finish line in an F course, it's pretty easy. Obviously, the mark is to starboard of the signal boat. Mark boat streams the mark, and using a compass, the signal boat tells them when to drop it. Keep it, once again, both the committee boat and that mark, the finishing mark, have a 3 boat length circle around them. So try to keep it as near 6 or 7 boat lengths as possible so that you can read the sail numbers. And schematically, here you go. The starting line is the single most important task of the race committee, because as you know, if it's not a good starting line, you've got a lot of problems. The rule of thumb is the number of boats times the length of the competing boats. And it can be 1 to 1.5 times that. In higher winds, it should be in big seas or high performance boats, it should be more toward the 1.5, and shorter, the line should be shorter in light air, flat water, or slow boats. Square is fair. So in that case, the boats spread out evenly. You can slightly favor a disadvantaged side if you want. That gets a little tricky. If your angle error is around 5 degrees, you're okay. If it's 10 degrees or more, you've got a problem, and you need to think about postponing and fixing the line. And once again, don't let perfect get in the way of good. You communicate with the mark boat by VHF, and there are detailed instructions in the RC Training video unit 2. 30 to 10 minutes before the warning signal. Review the starting sequence with your team. Are you using Rule 26 or Appendix U? What are the sounds and the flags that need to be hoisted and lowered? Continue the check-in. Decide on what course you're going to have, the direction and distance. Hoist the orange flag. And here we go, race RRS 27.1, not later than the warning signal. You need the compass bearing, the course, and the class board, all ready to go. Be careful with the compass board. It's easy to screw things up. For example, if you look at it that way, it's 150, but it's just as easy for someone to get dyslexic and put in 051 or 1 reversed 5 and 0 or anything like that. So it helps to have 2 people, one person to do it and another person to check it and make sure the number is proper. Well, we've all been sailing out at SSA with the sailing instructions, and the course designations seem to be sort of hieroglyphic in some way. But let's go through them in an organized fashion. The first letter indicates the finish. So a W is a windward finish, an L is a leeward finish, TW is triangle with a windward, TL is triangle with the leeward. The next letter is either there or it's not. If it's an A, there is an offset mark at the weather mark. If there's nothing there, there's no offset. The next letter is the type of finish, and this depends on whether it's a leeward finish or a windward finish. And there are 4 cases for a leeward finish. Back through the starting line, between the leeward mark and the committee boat, through a finish line, which is on the opposite side of the signal boat from the start line or the reaching finish. And most of what we do is F. We set a separate finish line and have them finish on the starboard side of the signal boat. So for W finishes, if there's nothing after that, there'll be a separate finishing line above the windward mark and a committee boat up there. If there's an S, then the finish is between the windward mark and the committee boat. And then finally, there's a number that is the number of windward legs. So, you know, the most common one that we use is the LAF2. And that's right in the middle. And you can see down by the starting line, the boats would leave there, go up around the weather mark once, around the leeward mark, number 3. And of course, the A means that there's that offset up there at the windward mark. So the leeward finish, then the F means that finishing on the opposite side of the signal boat. You need to set the mode that you're going to use on the iStart. And it's can be kind of confusing, but there are only a few that you need to worry about. And I've listed them here. You don't need to remember this because there's a chart on the iStart itself that will tell you, but be aware of which ones are there. TSOD, Frostbite, mode 22. 2-minute sequence with a bunch of beeps for the alert, attention, 15 seconds before. Appendix U, 5-minute rule. I'm sorry, Appendix U, 3-minute rule, and Thursday night sailing. Mode 30 does not give you any alerts or attentions. 32 or 34 will give you those alerts either 15 or 60 seconds before the beginning of the sequence. And Rule 26, the 5-minute sequence, mode 50, no attention beeps. Mode 52 beeps at 60 seconds. So there's a full table, and if you want to change the mode, you have to push the button repeatedly. And if you look at the table, there are some numbers that sections that are missing. So if you're going like 10, 20, 30, you may jump to 50. So be careful of that, but it'll circle around. So if you just keep pushing, you'll get back to the beginning. 3 buttons, one to change the mode, one for manual horn, one to start the sequence, and of course the upper right-hand corner has the power button. Now, don't use any automatic attentions modes after a postponement, a general recall, or abandonment. Why? Because the racing rules say you need to have the warning signal made 1 minute after these flags come down, and these flags come down with one sound, not a whole bunch of beeps. So you need, if you're using automatic alerts, you need to change the mode from 52 to 50 or 32 or 34 to 30. And this is all in Racing Rule 29.2. The console on the favored end has a loud hailer. It has a built-in iStart. It's got the VHF for communication, which is that black handset, and VHF, the auxiliary one on the right-hand side, the white one, should be left on channel 16, which is a safety requirement. So you set up the starting line, but maybe it's not all that great. And the problems you can have are one end favored, and obviously boats bunch up, and if you get enough of them bunched up, you're going to have to recall. Too short, same thing. Strong current flowing to windward, boats are swept over the line. Obviously, you can do things to fix the first two, but the only way to fix the third one is to go to a penalty start and scare them enough that they won't hug the line and get swept over. So if you see the line is not perpendicular and probably too far out of perpendicular, you can postpone. Postponement is the magic eraser. Postpone it, and then straighten and lengthen the line. So if you've had a bunch over and you have a general recall, you have that opportunity to straighten or lengthen the line before restarting. Of course, you can always go to a penalty start, and of course, I is the mildest of them, and it does tend to keep boats from going over the second time. A good thing is to have the postponement flag AP ready, so that if you have a bad line and you're trying to get a start off and you see everyone is going to go over, rather than have a general recall, just postpone, straighten things out, and then start again. But it's a split-second decision. And obviously, all of us are sailors, and we'd rather have a good line and a fair start than rush something, even if we have to wait a little bit. So that pretty much concludes tonight's presentation. The second part of this will be tomorrow night at 7. And of course, there are the training videos on the web at severnsailing.org, accessed through the race committee tabs at the top. And we are putting the presentation charts up now. So if you have attended any of these or just want a refresher, you can just flip through the charts and get that. I think we're about got number 1 and 3 up. 2 is in process. The PRO, DRO training parts are slides, charts are going up as well. And I will say that, we want you to take this test and do the best you can with it. You will need a racing rule of sailing book for it, and you can also, you will benefit from being able to look at the charts that are up there, unless you've taken copious notes tonight and tomorrow night, because there are a lot of specific questions in there that are answered in the presentation decks.